Hello everyone. Before we begin, this video is the second entry to a narration posted on my channel a few months back, dubbed My House Sits at a Threshold of Evil. If you are not yet caught up on the lore, I implore you to listen to part 1 first. Link in the description. Thank you all for listening. Now, let's delve into the dark together. Life has been difficult since the escape from Auburndale. That obscure town in southern Illinois was something that I was going to put behind me. But I recently have been developing an illness ever since my encounter with that thing. It all started in November. I was getting back in my trailer, preparing to shave my whiskers, when I happened to take a look at my right arm. It had been feeling itchy for quite some time now, but I never thought it was serious until today. Now there was an apparent discoloration around the joints between the forearm and the upper arm. My entire elbow was starting to turn into a brownish color, similar to that weird sticky stuff that was in the basement of the old house. Had I caught something from touching it? The sight alone was enough to get my heart beating rapidly, and I had half a mind to take my razor blade and start cutting it out. My mind was racing, wondering what would happen to me. Upon further inspection, I noticed that it was flowing through my veins, slowly changing them as it went. Thankfully, though, this meant that I had plenty of time to try and get it fixed. But I didn't want to go to a doctor. Not with this. For all I knew, they might just lock me up and run experiments on me, as if I'm some biological threat to humanity or something. Burning it also wasn't going to be an option. The fact that it was already spreading through my veins was enough to tell me that the damage had been done. The only logical solution now would be to force an amputation before it gets to the rest of my body. But who's to say that would even work? How do I know it hasn't already spread to my whole body, and this is just one of the symptoms? That I'd be down an arm and still get nowhere. I wasn't going to have a lot of options, other than to do one. Return to Auburndale. Return to that threshold of evil. I packed lightly, deciding to call ahead this time and set myself up a motel. The same motel I ended up spending time at after my house burned down. The drive back in was nerve-wracking at best. At worst, I wanted to drive myself off the side of the road and convince myself yet again that I can't return. And now, I know that sounds drastic, but think of it like this. Would you ever want to go back inside a cage with a man-eating tiger? That thing tried to eat me last time. But if fire could hurt it, there's no reason why firearms couldn't. So, to prevent such a scenario from playing out a second time, I decided to meet up with an old friend first. I'll keep his name anonymous, but he's a hillbilly, so to speak. He lives in Missouri and has quite the collection of guns. I asked him if I could use one. Now, typically, you would think that he would ask to know if I had a license. I don't, but I told him that it was for hunting in an obscure spot.
Well,
he spoke, with a toothy whistle in his voice.
I'd be obliged not to let you take my old shotgun. But you know, founding fathers definitely said it was every man's right, so I'll just look the other way if you want to get that deer.
I'm thankful he was not a smart guy. Plus, it's probably good that I'm not bringing him along either. He'd go about babbling it to all his bar buddies. I thanked him for the shotgun and told him that I would return it to him soon enough. I went to my car and began the short drive back to Illinois to get that cure or to get that vendetta settled. As I got back in my car, I could feel a soreness develop around the wound. The pain was getting worse. I found myself entering the town again. My emotions were catching up to me, although it seems to have changed since I was last here. A lot of the houses are emptied and have police tape wrapped around all the doorposts. Before I make my stop at the motel, I decided to stop at a supermarket to get some food and also information about what's going on. Though, given the circumstances, I had quite a good hunch.
After getting some trail mix, I went up to a pretty blonde lady who looked to be around my age and asked, "It seems pretty quiet around here." She seemed apprehensive, so I tried to get her to speak by asking further. "I'm curious about why that is. Has there been a wave of crime going on?" "Yeah," she muttered under her breath, scanning the bag. I looked around and saw that nobody was making eye contact with me. It would seem that everyone knew the answer, but I was tired of the tense atmosphere and decided to cut to the chase. "It's because of that thing in the woods," I said flatly. She froze in place, her eyes becoming wider, and I could even see a little sweat dripping down her forehead. It looked like I hit the nail on the head. "I don't think we should talk about that." "I'm pretty sure we need to." An older gentleman intervened and said with a throaty voice, "How about you back things up? Things have been bad enough with a malevolent creature." "Oh, is that so? And why is it attacking the town? From what I heard, shouldn't it only attack those who get too close to its neck of the woods?" She finished up the sale and quickly handed over my bag. "It's angered. After some idiot burnt down that house, it became restless and violent. Don't go looking for it if you know what's good for you." Ignoring the idiot comment, I thought about how unfortunate it was, because that's exactly what my whole reason for being here is. Also, I better leave out the part where I'm the guy who's partially responsible for the burning of the house. "This happened after the house burned down?" She remained silent, but the older man spoke for her. "It was a few months after. I heard that it's been walking around like a man, picking off people who thought they'd be safe in their homes." I found it odd that only a little while after it started attacking, but I guess it's not important. He's attacking these innocent people, and I have to stop him after causing this death and misery. Now I have that guilt to haunt me. I won't let him continue this. I grabbed my stuff and looked at both of them and said, "Well, I'll try to be safe." Later, I returned to where my old house used to be. The building was still a bunch of ashes that had long since stopped burning. I can't believe it had been almost a year since that whole incident. I still hate how the real estate agent managed to trick me into thinking this would be a cheap fixer-upper. From this point on, I'm no longer taking chances on houses that are in the middle of decaying, or near the woods. Going into the backyard, I stood at the edge of the cliff face, shotgun wrapped around my shoulder and carrying a hunting knife, just in case the rotten animal gets too close for comfort. My arm was killing me now. The pain was becoming more excruciating now than before, and my veins were growing browner with each pass, nearly reaching my shoulder. So the only thing I can do at this point is assume that killing him will cure me. That, or I at least get some measure of revenge, but it's an intelligent creature. Perhaps I could reason with him first. The loud howl of an elk shattered through the silence. I stared down into the woods to see two blue lights burning through. Not the body, only those malicious eyes that stared back up at me. "So, you know I'm here," I said to myself. Looking at the pathway down, I started my trek to the bottom, and when I reached it, I was met with a layer of dead animals everywhere, most of them being covered up by dead leaves that stretched all the way into the forest ahead. I had to psych myself to keep going. I was still having a few second thoughts to just go to a regular doctor, but again, I don't want to be experimented on. Pressing forward, my thoughts wandered towards another potential source that might help me. Perhaps that priest or maybe some Native Americans have some insights on how to handle this beast. My mind was so fixated on revenge that I should have done a little more thinking down the line. Well, too late to turn back now. The air was rancid with rot, a symbol of how evil and deplorable this land was towards any man with a sense of civility. That grotesque creature has been ending the lives of hundreds of innocents for far too long. God, that sounds so cheesy. Finally, I stepped out into a clearing, surrounded by trees and with a large, pointed rock in the middle of the opening. I cautiously approached it, taking a look at the strange marks that had been painted and carved onto the surface. The painting parts were similar to Neolithic cave drawings. There were a group of people huddled around a campfire. It transitioned over to some of them grabbing their spears and charging towards a being of blue, abstract paint that was featured as streaks of lightning. The hunters appeared to try their best to attack it, and it seemed to work to a degree, as the next transition depicted the blue streaks wandering off into the forest. I was taken aback by all of this. What could the blue streaks mean? And why did ancient humans want to fight that of all things? I walked over to the other side of the rock, only to see that there was another depiction that had been painted in. It showed a circle and featured another circle that was much smaller, falling in towards the big one. Then the next part showed the circle erupting with blue streaks that spread across the land until it found the decayed remains of a dinosaur. I took a few steps back until I realized just what this meant. The bones and rotten flesh got up on its hind legs and began wandering across the land, collecting more body parts from the remains of the other dinosaurs. The way it had been depicted was enough to look just like that monstrosity. "No way," I said in shock.
Oh, are you finally connecting the pieces?
I turned around and saw that giant bag of bones standing behind me a ways off. He said, calmly,
Trespassing again. How typical of a human.
I tried to intimidate. "Listen, I got a shotgun, and I'm not afraid to render you nothing more than a pile of bones this time around."
I got set on fire last time we met. What makes you think a shotgun stands a chance?
He had me there, but I came with a little insurance, too. Without my friend realizing it, I had also swiped a few sticks of dynamite when he wasn't looking. If the shotgun wasn't able to disconnect all of his stolen body parts, I'm pretty sure an explosive round might be able to blow him back to dust. I guess we'll have to see. But I actually came back because I needed to know something. And my arm, it's infected. I may have contracted a poison from the house. It's turning brown. I rolled up my sleeve to show him. He walked with the posture of a casual villain. His arms were behind his back and had this sinister stare aimed at me with those blue lights for eyes.
Oh,
He chuckled.
looks like you got a little too close to my bathroom in the basement. How embarrassing of you. You're infected with whatever disease I have crawling all over the remains of these animals that I use to move around in.
How about you cure me? I don't fight you.
That's an incredibly stupid plan. Did you actually believe that I would help save your life after you burned my outhouse down?
Angered by his statements, especially since that was a house and not a latrine, I swung the shotgun, cocked it, and kept my aim trained on his general location. "You know, I kind of figured that you weren't going to help me. A part of me probably already knew that I wasn't going to survive much longer after our little spat, so I'm going to keep shooting you until you're a rotten carcass on this wretched ground." He dug his boots into the dirt, reached his arm back to pull out his broadsword, and with a snarling, serpent-like hiss, he shouted,
Come on over to die faster then.
I swallowed hard. This was not going to be an easy duel. I wasn't an insanely athletic guy, nor was I feeling a hint of bravery overtaking my actions. All I knew was that I was dying, and this evil was killing others because of my actions. Normally, I would run away, but I'm already cornered, so this is where I have to make my stand. Without thinking too hard, I pressed hard on the trigger and felt the kick immediately throw me back. I stayed on my feet, just barely.
but watched as the impact of the shotgun tore through a section of the leather armor on this beast. He howled in a rage and charged at me. I saw his sword coming right from my head, and with the sudden boost of adrenaline, I ducked down and jumped to the side as far as I could. The creature moves a lot slower than me, so I have a speed advantage. With a reload and another cock of the gun, I unloaded another shot into the monster, this time missing.
From matches to bullets, I'm impressed.
He said, tauntingly. Still using a sword in a gunfight? Kinda lame. I spoke through labored breathing.
It's good for cutting bodies up.
He sadistically laughed. Seeing that another attack was about to happen, I had to reload quickly. Just as I was finished, he held his sword high and ran towards me at a much faster speed than I expected. I was expecting him to go for another swing, but he turned his body and managed to hit me with his shoulder and sent me flying through the air and landing near the tree line. That hit alone was enough to knock the wind right out of me. As I tried to get back up, still clutching the shotgun with as much tightness in my grip as I had left in me, the creature was already on top of me again, but I took aim at close range and was able to give him a harsh punishment when another blast of shotgun shells completely took out the left section of his torso, nearly detaching off his arm. He howled, this time in apparent pain.
You filthy humans. You think you own everyone else that shares this world. We were the lords of these lands, and you just outpopulated us into the obscure spots. Now you're just here to destroy us, while we are on the verge of our extinction.
I wasn't interested in hearing the rest of his sob story. This is survival of the fittest, and I'm going to make sure this creature can never hurt anyone again. I had my gun aimed squarely on the head. Without any hesitation, I pressed the trigger hard and only heard a click. What? I spoke, in defeat, realizing that I forgot to reload. He chuckled at my miscalculation and swiftly kicked me hard with his boot, sending me flying again, this time into a tree and tossing my gun away. But instead of trying to finish me off, he got on 2 feet and kept holding on to his most severe injury, the torso shot that I got on him.
You did a number on me. It's been a while since some humans have managed that.
Whatever. You win. I know it sounds like a defeat, but I'm tired. The pain in my arms has only managed to cause me to get weaker faster, so I'm not feeling like I can go on much longer. Not unless a miracle happens. He limped over and was about to use his sword on me, but out of nowhere, a pack of wolves made of stone and covered in patches of moss came out of the woods and surrounded both of us. We both looked around in confusion, not quite sure where any of them came from. That's when I heard the clapping of someone nearby. Well, if you're impressed by the human, then I'm overjoyed. Walking out into view from the top of the large boulder in the center, a cloaked, hooded figure with long, pale, white skeletal hands pressed together got our attention.
You're another trespasser. Go back to your own land.
It laughed hysterically upon hearing that, its voice being high-pitched and really condescending. You must be out of touch about what's going on the outside world. Don't you know that we're in a war right now?
Don't care.
The monster replied.
I only want to spend the rest of my eons here.
The hooded figure dressed in white cloth stepped up from the top and slowly descended towards the ground. It reached towards its head and pulled the hood down to reveal a solid white head shaped like a human, but with no features other than a large gaping hole of a mouth, the inside of which had rows upon rows of fangs. That's a shame, you walking animal corpse. I don't know why you bother with using body parts. It's so degrading to our species.
Don't preach to me about borrowing body parts. I already know you created that skin suit out of the remains of humans.
He shouted back with a snarl. The white figure chuckled. No matter. I'm going to be taking your land anyway. As if on cue, all of the stone wolves started pouncing onto the monster. They were tearing large sections of his body to pieces, slowly eating away at him. I tried my best to get up and run away, hoping to slip out from whatever drama these two have. Holding onto my leg, I saw my shotgun nearby, grabbed it, and booked it for the surrounding woods. I went as fast as my limping legs would allow, constantly looking around in paranoia. I didn't want any of those wolves to come looking for me. I gotta hide, I mumbled under my breath. I looked at the barrel of my shotgun and reloaded it, not going to be caught lacking a second time. Unfortunately for me, I was soon tackled and fell onto the side of a dirt mound. One of those stone wolves had me pinned and started biting at me. Going through all of this reminded me of when I was a little boy and a dog bit my leg. I remember that dog bite quite well, but that was far more excruciating to go through. It was like a bear trap had already snapped its way to the bone in my left leg. I kept thrashing back and forth, intent on tearing it out, but in my desperate attempt to survive, I quickly aimed the barrel, not giving myself much time to make a calculation, closed my eyes, and shot it in the skull. Much to my surprise, a spray of pebbles and bloody gray matter hit me in the face. I opened my eyes, startled to see an empty cavity of a liquefied brain. These moving statues were alive. Now both of my legs were in immense pain, and I needed somewhere to rest. I kept limping forward, spotting a cave nearby. Without any other options, I climbed in and rested on the largest boulder that was in there. For what felt like an hour, all I could do was breathe heavily and try to calm down my racing heart. I groaned and moaned from the fiery pain that was traveling up my leg. I was trapped in this forsaken forest, primordial monsters everywhere, and the number of bullets that I had left on me was starting to dwindle down into the last chance category. What am I gonna do? I muttered. There was a sudden rumbling of stones nearby, and I quickly looked to my right to see what appeared to be a mesh of raccoon, groundhog, and warthog body parts stitching together, with a skull of some unidentifiable animal. Blue lights for eyes. Oh, just my luck, I sighed loudly. He replied,
Normally I'd kill you, but I'm hiding too, and can't afford for you to scream like a whimpering child.
Well then, consider us both cave buddies, I joked. He stared back at me, not breaking eye contact, and said coldly,
No.
For 10 minutes, it felt as if a century had passed. I never looked away from him, still convinced that if I did, he would make short work of me and be able to feast afterward. You know, I could shoot you again. I tried to sound intimidating. He chuckled and rested on the rock.
You're not going to. You're too scared of our pursuer to do that.
Am not.
R2. I still remember you trying to escape from the house like a scared little puppy.
Yeah, because you're nothing more than a freak.
You're so stupid. I don't actually look like this amalgamation of corpses. You read my rock. Surely you could have figured it out.
What are you? I instinctually moved closer.
I told you before, I'm a being that lived here on Earth for millions of years.
I leaned in closer. Yeah, but what are you? I assume you're from outer space. That guy at the church told me. His head lowered slightly.
We all are.
We?
I, and hundreds of other primordials. We live on this planet to expand our territory in the great cosmos above. But we're not actually life forms like you.
He pointed at the blue light in the eye sockets of the skull.
This is my true form, We resemble streaks of light and can take over any form of organic, or in some rare cases, inorganic material to create outer shells.
So, you're made of light. Would my shotgun have even killed you? He laughed dismissively.
Of course not. You were merely destroying the shell, which I can always get more, considering the number of animals that I like to leave piled up. Although, I still have to eat sometimes.
Eat people, you mean? I coldly responded.
Yes, but I haven't eaten for a while due to everyone staying away. Unless a few children dare their friends here. But ever since you burned down my house, even they have little reason to come by.
His comments stuck with me. Something wasn't adding up. A bunch of people have been going missing around the town, and yet he says he hasn't eaten anyone for some time. Wait, but I heard that a lot of people have gone missing recently. I thought that was you.
I don't know what you're talking about. I've only been eating the animals that still come around.
It was slowly growing colder as nighttime approached. There was only an hour, maybe less, of sunlight left. I had nothing to make a fire with, and I didn't want to accidentally fall asleep with that thing in the cave. I had to come up with an idea on how to get rid of that rival and escape. Just then, a spasm attack hit my arm, and it was shaking violently. I tried to hold it down, but the pain was like fire on it. I had sweat drenched over my head, and I looked to him. He took note of my pain, but said nothing. Not that I was expecting comfort from him anyway. I had to hold my breath and try not to scream, kept looking over at the monster, and wondered if I could hold out much longer. I needed to come up with a way to avoid my earthly death and be cured. Hey, how about a proposal? I gritted my teeth, really not wanting to do this, but I knew I had no choice.
Oh, what kind?
He looked as if he was ready to shut it down already. Help my arm, and I'll help you kill that rival of yours. He looked up and appeared to be in deep thought, but almost as quickly, he turned back towards me and said,
I think I can take him. I have an extra body stashed in the back of this cave anyway.
What? I gasped. He smugly said,
Just watch behind me.
and just like that, the tiny corpse's body fell apart when the lights went out of its eyes. All of its little bones and scraps of meat fell apart, and from behind the rock, a large hand slowly caressed it. It was an exact replica of the original body from when I first met it. Why do you make all of your bodies look the same?
I thought it looked scary. And trust me, it's very scary when you're in the woods alone.
But why'd it take so long to get into that body? I asked, curiously.
I need to regenerate my light cells, grow back the size to effectively control this body. Now shut up.
As he made for the exit, I pleaded again, reminding him of the number disadvantage. He stopped and looked out at the sunset, pulled out a sword just like the old one, and spoke with a sneer.
Usually, I'd rather not work with your kind. You've destroyed the environment and pushed my race out of the greater world. But personally, I'd like to live to see your race die out. And if that means...
There was a long pause between us. He exhaled.
I don't think I'll be able to take on all of those wolves of his. Your shotgun might prove useful.
He turned back towards me and laid his hand on my arm. There were zaps of static electricity that tickled my whole arm as he caressed it. The brown ooze was retreating out of my veins, and shortly afterwards, my whole arm was fixed.
A deal's a deal. Don't go running off on me. And don't expect me to spare you after we beat them and go our separate ways. I'll give you one chance to get in your car and leave me be. Come back, and I will kill you.
I'll be honest, I did have half a mind to do exactly that, but he could probably find me, and those wolves would likely tear me apart. We were going to have to, begrudgingly, work together to survive. Our march to the woods was rather peaceful. It was quiet. There was still sun out, but it was slowly going down. We had to find that other primordial before nighttime would be a disadvantage. But mostly for me, though. When we came back to the large boulder in the center of the woods, it was as if What's-His-Name was issuing a second challenge for the rival to notice us. "Is this the rock you came from?" I asked.
No.
He coldly remarked.
What makes you think an asteroid would survive the impact on this world?
I don't know. I'm not good at astronomy.
Clearly.
He raised his skeletal snout to the sky and let out a piercing elk hollering. It was so loud that I actually had to cover my ears. "You could have warned me." He ignored my angered request. Now they were coming. The pattering of feet running through the leaves and coming from all directions around us was enough reason for me to prepare the shotgun. I gripped it tightly, keeping my eyes focused on the trees around us. He also raised his sword high and didn't seem unfazed. But then, 3 of the stone wolves came rushing out from the forest and tried to pounce on us. Their coordination was terrible, but that works to our advantage. I started firing when I felt comfortable enough to hit them, happy that I had a shotgun because the spray of bullets instantly shattered the head of one of them, and my monstrous partner lunged forward and grabbed hold of one of them by the neck before smashing it down into the ground. This did not destroy the wolf, but his sword was plunged through its neck and snapped the wolf in two. The remaining wolf turned back, but my partner grabbed hold of it by the tail and pulled it back, swinging it up into the air and crashing it back down onto the ground. The head exploded with a gush of brain matter spraying everywhere. "These things only have brains?" I inquired. He got down and licked the horrid mess.
It tastes like human.
Why would they be human brains? Then, the realization hit me like a freight train. All of the people going missing around here, and my partner not having anything to do with it. That could only mean that whatever this thing is, it was the one kidnapping people around the town and stuffing their brains inside these statues. "I see you found out my little secret." The vile humanoid came walking out from the woods. "I'd rather you stop destroying my stone slabs. It takes me some time to make one, but these human brains are especially useful in making them come to life." I clenched hard on the trigger, not pressing it just yet. But my anger was at a boiling point, and I immediately took aim. Oh, what a brave little human. "Hey, Cusham, is this little human your friend?" I looked up at the monster next to me and said, "Cusham? That's your name?"
Yes.
He looked at me and turned his eyes back.
But how did you hear about it?
The rival snickered like a malevolent trickster. "You really think that I didn't read anything that you drew on that rock behind you?" I briefly looked back and knew for certain that there were more secrets hidden away on this massive boulder. What other secrets did it hide?
Enough talk. Let's fight.
Cusham ran towards the intruder, finding myself keeping watch for more stone wolves. The 2 of them were battling it out. A titanic fight that I knew I would get one-shotted if I ever tried to intervene. Standing guard was my only option. Although I felt a mix of hesitation now, considering that these were humans that had been forcibly turned into mindless slaves. I was killing them. But then again, I can't think like that. I know there are human brains in there, but they're just a body to be controlled by that thing. I have to do what's right and free them from their enforced servitude. Sparks of light were exploding off of both of them. Blue and green lights were twisting around each other in violent arrays that sent shockwaves through the land and air. Cusham was an incredibly intimidating beast, a vicious animal that would not quit fighting until there was no more strength left in him. But it was clear to me that this fight was becoming more one-sided. The white-skinned humanoid rival was effortlessly dodging his attacks, only getting hit whenever Cusham used his fists instead of the sword. Why was he so attached to that primitive weapon? It wasn't doing him any good, and he should just make this more of a brawl since this was proving a little more successful. I was just about ready to move in and assist when another wolf snuck up behind me, and I had to use the shotgun to block its mouth from biting my face off. It kept trying to snap its jaws more, slowly crushing and breaking the shotgun if I didn't get it off quickly. The rival managed to use lightning-fast punches at Cusham's chest, and he fell down on one knee, almost completely giving up. Then, I remembered, I still had the stick of dynamite on me, as well as the knife. I pulled out the knife first, and with all my strength, I shoved it into the eye of the wolf. Imagine trying to stab a stone. I saw the blade was going to break and slice my hand in the process. The wolf released, and I quickly blew its head apart. Catching my breath, I watched as the intruder pinned Cusham to the ground. He gloated. "How sad. You actually believed you stood a chance. I've already devoured 8 others before you, and they were far more powerful." He was so hyper-focused on his prey, I slowly approached from behind. He continued. "No matter. Once I kill you, I'll go on to the next few left, and all the others will have to abide by my rule." Cusham tried to snatch him, but that humanoid had broken both his arms in the struggle. "Any last words?" he taunted. "Right behind him," I said. "Look behind you." He turned around, confused about how I was able to move so close up, only to stare down 2 barrels of the gun. I fired, and I managed to splinter a huge chunk of his head to pieces. He fell off and quickly tried to pull his head together as the green light was escaping out. Cusham took this opportunity to repeatedly start smashing his foot down on top of the rival. I knew that this wasn't going to work. There was only one way to kill him. I quickly grabbed the dynamite and lit it. I yelled, "Cusham, out of the way!" He turned around and knew what I was doing as he saw me throw the sparkling stick. He quickly jumped away, and the stick just managed to run out of the fuse as it was on top of our enemy. He let out a tormented scream before the explosion engulfed him into a small plume of smoke and shock. Beams of light started to streak into the air and disperse into the atmosphere. I was momentarily unable to hear anything as the shock had set in. But for the moment, it felt as if I really accomplished something today. We beat it. I looked around and saw Cusham limping away. We stared at each other for a good while. He nodded at me, and I gave him a soft smile. The deal was over. I got up and walked in the opposite direction, back up to the cliff face and to my car that waited for me. And so, last I heard, there were no more people going missing. After going through that excitement, I was truly more interested now than before in the unusual and unnatural secrets that exist in the world. Monstrous light-based aliens that have come down to our world. A war that is brewing. An overwhelming excitement to try and stop whatever forces are gathering from plunging the rest of the world into chaos. I don't have a lot of money for travel, but there is a need out there for people who are willing to risk everything and see what other nightmares are waiting to be discovered. And who knows, maybe Cusham would like the insurance that no others are going to come around on his territory. I would much rather have that threshold of evil be a starting point for resistance against a greater threat that has its deadly sights on us all. My name is Henry, and this is the start of my monster hunting career.